It's time for another Football Manager tier list video, but today, instead of ranking the best players or the best Wonderkids, I'll be focusing in on something other than actual footballers, actual human beings. I'll be taking a look at what is the best role in Football Manager. As you can see, I've got all the tactical roles available to me on screen right now, from advanced forward to wide target man, and I'm going to have to filter through them all, in my own opinion, ranking them in a bunch of categories. We've got 5 to pick from: the avoid category for the ones that I really think you should not be using, the meh category for those that I just don't think are great roles and you could do much better, the usable category for those roles that you're not really going to shout home about but always do a dependable job. Then we've got great, which is as it says on the tin, and then the GOAT category reserved for the best of the best role. Now do bear in mind, this is all my opinion, so you're bound to have different ones, as with every tier list video that we do here on the channel, and if that is the case, then let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your favourite role and the one that you dislike the most, and whilst you're down there, if you could smash the like button, and if you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you do so also. Now just to let you know, I did do this video in FM23 for the roles back then, but since then, my opinions on a lot of these roles have drastically changed, and even some of them were changed by Sports Interactive themselves. Now just to let you know, this tier list is from FM21, so it is a few years old, and for that reason, we are missing a role. I think it's the only one we're missing based on the checks that I did, but if I'm wrong, correct me. But the inverted fullback created in FM24 is not on this list. If you don't know, it's a role that allows one of your fullbacks to operate as an extra central defender. Usually if you have an inverted wingback or a libero who are going forward from defence, it just allows that fullback to shuffle over and basically create a back three in most scenarios. Think Kyle Walker for Man City when John Stones goes forward, or Cancelo used to go into the midfield. That's the kind of thing you're looking at, and for me, if that role was available as a choice, I would have it in the usable section. It's nothing anyone's going to shout home about, but it does its job. It allows other players to flourish, and for that reason, usable would be the place I put it. And with that being said, let's kick off with the ones that we have got in this list. I'm just going to pick them out at a random order. I haven't pre-planned this. I don't know what's going to go where just yet. So let's start moving through. Firstly, I'm going to go for where my cursor is hovering over, deep line forward. A striker role that definitely is not one of my favourites, and I actually think maybe outside of one other role, it is the weakest striker role possible. From what you're looking for with a deep line forward, I think if you want that style of play, you're better off going for a target man. In most cases, if you just switched it to advanced forward, even if it looks like the player wouldn't really suit it, they'll probably do a better job than you might think. You definitely can have some success maybe in a front two with a deep line forward, or maybe if you've got two inside forwards coming in and getting some shots off and goal. But for me, it's a meh one. It's not one that I'd really suggest. I think there's better roles out there. I have tried it a couple times this year. I already didn't like it, and this year it hasn't really changed my opinion on it. But one that definitely has had my opinion changed is the anchor man. This is one that I think last year I would have definitely had in the meh tier, maybe even avoid, to be honest. But for me, I'm not even going to say it's just a usable role, but from when I have used it this year, it's a great role. It's a role that really, really helps your team flourish. The anchorman never really is going to be the man getting 8 average match ratings every game, but it basically operates as almost an extra centre-back in some cases. It's really just going to be a linchpin in that midfield, and for me, it lets all your other central midfielders flourish, particularly if you've got wing-backs bombing forward or some kind of defensive player getting forward. The anchorman is a great player to slot in and bolster that defence. I really have liked it when I've used it that year, so for me, it's going in the great tier. Up next, we have a midfield role, and that's the Carolero, which I won't lie to you, if you just saw a cut, it's because I mispronounced it about 5 times, and I still don't think I've got it right, but we are choosing it. It's a central midfield role, and it's, again, much like the deep line forward, I just think there's so many better roles in that position that are going to get you similar effects, but to a better level. It's a very specialised option as well. I don't think many players have the attributes to really suit it. So for me, it's in the meh tier. I think if you've got it in your tactic, try a different role and you'll probably have some more success, which leads me nicely onto the box-to-box midfielder. Not necessarily a carbon copy of that role, but kind of similar in terms of the kind of player that you would want to play the Carolero. Might also suit well to that box-to-box midfielder role. But for me, if you have a choice from the two, I would go box-to-box. I think it's a honest, good role. It's never going to be the one that gets you insane results. This midfielder is going to score, he's going to create, he's going to break up attacks. You need someone that's a real workhorse, but in the modern game, there's quite a lot of them out there. If you've got a big, powerful midfielder, a good runner on the ball, who's maybe a good dribbler too, the box-to-box midfielder can be a very, very handy role to have in your setup. We're going to continue with the midfield roles while we're here with defensive midfielder. Now for me, this is very simple. It's actually really, really similar to the anchor anchorman in-game, but I just think defensive midfielder is not as good as the anchorman this year. If you have a defensive midfielder, try using an anchorman, see how you get on. I think you'll get a better result. Not a bad role by any stretch, but for me, just slot straight in to usable. Up next, I'm going to go for, let's take a random pick, defensive winger. This is one that I wanted to do. I know some people told me last year that they have had some success with it. It works well if you use this instead of having really aggressive wing backs, and fair play if that is what you want to do, but avoid this role. I think it is not a role that you want to use in FM. The amount of players that are going to suit it are going to be low, but in your tactic, I think you'll be much better off having some inverted wingers inside forwards, or even just wing backs on the attack duty in your defence, and you'll get better output than these defensive wingers will. Up next, I'm going to go for deep line playmaker. That's just popped into my eye line, and we're going to go for that. Again, for me, it's an honest role. It's going to go in the usable section. You never get standout performances from it. In fact, it's one of them where sometimes you have a player that really suits deep line playmaker, but it just doesn't seem to quite work out. I tend to like it more at the base of the midfield as opposed to being part of, say, a midfield pivot, but obviously use it in whatever way you want to use it. For me, it's a decent role, it's nothing more than that. And whilst we're on the topic of playmaking roles, let's drop down and find roaming playmaker. Here it is, let's bring this up. And for me, I'm actually going to have this one less. It was one that I used to use in FM23, but I never really had great success with it, not for the lack of trying. I've tried to put it in a few tactics. Now, Josh, who does other videos on the FMSCOUT channel, has reviewed a few nap tactics which use the roaming playmaker, and they can be quite functional, but you do have to have a lot of additional instructions on. It's not one that I really prefer, so in my own opinion, remember this is just my opinion, it will be in the meh section. And so far, we've got quite a lot of these roles that I don't think are great compared to the ones that I do think are good. So let's go and pick up a role that I'm a big fan of, and that is complete forward. I'm not necessarily sure what's going to push into the GOAT category just yet, but complete forward, yes, it is a specialised striker role, and you do need a good striker to do it, but if you have a physical presence who's also got a bit of pace, can pass fairly well, makes good decisions, and can score goals with good finishing, put them in as a complete forward over advanced forward over target man. I actually think this is the best striker role if you have a player that suits it, but there's another role that we'll talk about later which every player kind of suits, even at a very basic level. Complete forward, like I say, is a specialist one. But if you do have a player whose attributes match the complete forward, you will get some great results out of them, I can guarantee it. A top role, a brilliant striker role, even on its own, or as part of a two. So for me, complete forward slots into the great category. And now we're going to go from CF to CD. Central defender, very basic, one of the main defensive roles you'll use, and at the same time, ball playing defender. For me, they go hand in hand. Usually you have one of them in a pair. You might have a ball playing defender with a central defender, two ball playing defenders, two central defenders, whatever you have. I think you'll find there isn't that much distinction between the two of them. Of course, the ball playing defender is a little bit better for you if you have someone that's better with the ball at their feet and you're trying to play a proactive style, playing out the back, but both of them are just very solid roles. You're likely going to use them. You're never going to look at them and go, I hate this role. It's just a rolling game that pretty much everyone uses. You don't often see anything else. The only one that you might see outside of that is in the lower leagues, the no-nonsense centre back. But for me, I'm going to have that in the meh tier. Obviously, there are players that suit this. If you have someone that just really isn't good at being on the ball and you just want them to whack it clear every time they get it, like I say, low league attributes tend to suit this role. They're no-nonsense. It's not the worst in the world, but for me, it's just a meh role, one I'm never really looking to use in any tactic, and what you will find is most meta tactics, ones that do really well in game, very rarely use a no-nonsense player, whether that be centre-back or whether it be full-back. Now last year I'm pretty sure I put no-nonsense full-back in the avoid section, but I got a lot of comments about this. It was probably the one that people disagreed with the most. A lot of people were saying if your full-back gets injured and you don't have a replacement, bringing on a centre-back in full-back is going to kill you, but if you bring them on as a no-nonsense full-back, they can really lock down the wing. They're not going to go forward, but the defensive side of the game they really will focus in on. I just think this year though, with the inverted fullback that they introduced, the no-nonsense one maybe is a little less useful, but still, I'm going to take it away from the avoid section. You guys have convinced me. I used it once this year, and I didn't really bat an eyelid at it. I'm going to say it's meh. It's fine. If you have to use it as, like you say, a substitute role with a central defender at fullback, then maybe it makes sense. But in most tactics, most ones that are going to do well, you want a fullback that's going to be a little bit more progressive, whether that be the actual fullback role, which I think is just a standard usable role, or whether it be, for me, the better role if I go and find it, wing back. That has got to go in the great section for me. It is the perfect role for a defender to have. If they've got decent work rate, they're good on the ball, and they're solid defensively too. Have them as a wing back, particularly on either support or attack, and you'll get some phenomenal results. Loads of assists from the wing. A lot of the best tactics this year do tend to use wing backs on the attack duty. It's also a role that will suit pretty much every fullback, whereas something like complete wing back can be effective, but you really need someone that's just great all around with the ball at their feet. So for me, that's just in the usable section. If we're looking for a fullback role, wing back is going to be the best of a bunch in my eyes. But that avoid section is looking a little bit bare, so I am going to add a role into here. It's the one that I think is actually worse than deep line forward for a striker. The poacher role for me is just not one you want to use. If you've got a striker in the low leagues on his last legs that can't run anymore, a 40-year-old, maybe, but realistically, even if you stuck them on an advanced forward duty, they would do a lot better. It's an old-fashioned role, one that you won't really see in the modern game nowadays. For me, poacher is just not a great role to use. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, I mentioned advanced forward. Let's talk about it. For me, it is definitely one of the best roles in Football Manager. We'll put it in the great section before we decide what is the GOAT. I had it as my GOAT last year, I'm pretty sure, and it will be up there again. Like I said earlier, complete forward probably will get you better results, but it's quite specialised, whereas advanced forward, even though you think you'd only have to use a player that's got a bit of pace about him to have this be successful, you could take your grandma with free pace, put them as an advanced forward, and they'd still do pretty well in game. It just seems to be a role that always tends to work. Particularly, it'll work very effectively if you've got someone that likes to beat the offside trap as one of their player traits, has some good pace, some decision making. If you have that, the advanced forward will run riot no matter who you have. Pretty much every striker that I have in the rebuilds that I do on my channel, which, subtle plug, you can find linked in the description should you want to check them out. Pretty much every striker that I use in the advanced forward role ends up suddenly becoming one of the best strikers in the league and selling on for massive money. The advanced forward is the ultimate role for getting goals even out of players that might not be the world's most capable strikers, so I'm going to have it in the great section. And now we're actually doing quite well on this list. We're moving through. Let's clear off a goalkeeper, shall we? Where we're going to have goalkeeper and sweeper keeper, just both of them. Let's find sweeper keeper. There it is. In the same section, usable. They are decent roles. They are just the goalkeeping roles. I tend to prefer a sweeper keeper, but I know some goalkeepers won't really be capable of that. It's the modern day way of playing, but I've genuinely had it in some rebuilds where I think I'm playing a sweeper keeper, and then 2 years in I realise I've just got it on the goalkeeper role and it hasn't really made a difference at all to the way my team is playing. But for me, they're just very basic usable roles, so let's get them in that section. Let's kill two birds with one stone here up next. Wide target man and wide playmaker, both of them for me going in the avoid section. I just don't think it's something that you want to use in your tactic. Wide target man, once again, is a very specialised role. Maybe a Mandzukic for Juventus back in the day did something similar, but it's just not one that's really going to be functional in FM at this stage. Wide playmaker, maybe a little bit more, but I just think if you've got a guy that's good on the ball creatively, either have him as a number 10, retrain him to play there, or just have him as an inverted winger inside forward on the right. Even if it seems their attributes would suit wide playmaker more, they will have more success with those other two roles. I can nearly guarantee it. Speaking of wide target man, let's move on to target man itself, which I probably would have in the usable tier, but I find myself using it less and less, so it might be one that goes in the meh, but I think I'm going to keep it in the usable one, just because, particularly in the lower leagues, if you do have a good target man, you will get tons of goals out of them. It's not one that I'd really use if you were trying to challenge for the Champions League, mind you, unless it was in some kind of front two system with a quicker, smaller striker nearby, but realistically, if you are going to stick an absolute slab of meat up top, who's big in the air and strong, play him as a target man, they'll do a decent job for your team. Now, this is where I'm going to hold my hands up. Some of you might think this is criminal, but there are 3 roles here that I just don't think I've used at all, so I can't really say anything on them. For that reason, I'm just going to put them in the meh tier. They might be better than what I'm giving them, but I just haven't used them at all for at least 2 years now, so I'm going to move them on. They're very free specialist roles, the Ramdeuter, the Ungonch, and also, if I can find it, where is it? The Trequartista, there we go. 3 roles I'm sure could be great. I'm not knocking them in any way, but I just haven't used them enough myself to give my opinion on them. Let's quickly cover them though. I don't know too much about how they will operate effectively in game, but the Ramdeuter is your Thomas Muller role, your space interpretator that basically finds space on the pitch and tries to abuse it in those attacking positions. You've got the Ungonch, who is almost like your classic number 10, where he's almost going to be that linchpin, stay central, everyone moves around him, and he's kind of just spraying out passes. Then you've got the Trequartista, who's going to play just off the striker, just in front of the midfield line, but before the attacking line, and he's going to be spraying passes out not just to your striker, but to your wide players too. Again, I'm no expert on how all of those will actually function in game view and whether they do what they say on the tin. I haven't used them enough, so I'm going to just pop them in the meh tier. But let's move on to an attacking midfielder role that I really do like. We have got the shadow striker. Don't worry, I'm not putting it in meh. I was just dragging it up. For me, this is one of those GOAT contenders. I love it. If you have a number 10 with decent finishing and you set them as a shadow striker, they will get goals and assists galore. A brilliant role and one that you will often see, and a lot of very effective tactics in game. Ball winning midfielder. This one will go in meh for me. This is quite a harsh one because I think there have been years where I have really enjoyed it when you've got that tough tackling midfielder alongside some of the more progressive thinkers in your team. But for me, it's just never super effective. I never tend to get a very good ball-winning midfielder, even one that suits it down to the ground. Their ratings in-game won't be that great. How effective are they really? I'm not too sure. I think there's definitely some other roles that will do a better job for you. Let's just clear the way a little bit before we move on with our last 10, 15 roles or so that we've got there. I am going to move the ones I think could be a contender for GOAT forward a little bit. Advanced forward will be up there. Shadow striker may be up there for now. I might change that down the line. Let's start going in order now, though, as we have whittled this list down quite well. Attacking midfielder, I'm going to put this in the meh tier. I said this last year and I will stand by it. I think advanced playmaker, shadow striker are much better number 10 roles. I think attacking midfielder isn't one that you'll get great results from. I also think you'll often find there isn't many players that suit this better than they suit the other 10 roles, which again, I think are more effective in game too. So the chances of you using this role is low, and then the effectiveness of it, I just don't think it's that high. So for me, attacking midfielder is in meh, and just above it, in the usable section, I will have the advanced playmaker. I think it's a better role than attacking midfielder, so I'm going to have it in that usable section. A very good choice for a number 10 who's a more creative player than he is a goal scorer. I still think if you've got someone that can shoot, have him as a shadow striker and you'll still get the effective assist output that you would normally get out of an advanced playmaker. Central midfielder is going straight in the great category. A role that's very versatile, but particularly in support or the attacking version of this role, you will get some fantastic results from. Up there really with the Mezzala, which I'll bring up now whilst we're talking about it. Both two very good midfield roles, two of my favourites. In previous years I might have had the Mezzala a little bit higher, but it's not one I've used as much this year in Football Manager. But I think Mezzala and central midfielder are great choices for a player in the middle of the park. Up next we've got false 9. Oh, this is going to be tough. I'm thinking avoid. I'm also thinking meh. No, I'm going to say meh. I don't think it's quite an avoid role. I think there are some players that really suit it. And if you're looking to play a Roberto Firmino style player with some good attacking wide players, go for it. But once more, if you do have a false 9, just try sticking them as an advanced forward. And I promise you, you'll probably get better results, even if it looks like they won't really suit it. Now, of course, results aren't the only thing. Some of us like the style of play, and I'm purely going based on what I enjoy in Football Manager. And for me, false 9 just isn't one of those. The halfback, though, it's probably not as good as the anchorman, I'd say, but I think it's a very stable role in that midfield, does its job well, and is one that I have used a little bit more this year, a little bit more than I have the Regista, which actually I'm going to drop down to meh. I think in previous years I would have had that higher, but I've just found it lacking compared to some of the others that I have used this time round. Anchorman, I think, is a much better option. Obviously, the Regista is one of those players that loves to get on the ball. It's going to be ticking everything along for you. Pretty much everything will go through them. Think Pirlo in the midfield kind of thing. But I think if you are going to have a player in that area, have it be an anchorman and then have that Regista style player play a bit further forward, either as an advanced playmaker in the centre of the pitch or potentially even further forward, or maybe just simply as a deep line playmaker. I think you'll likely get better results out of it, but the Regista is one of those roles I really want it to work really well because of how satisfying it would be. It just never seems to hit the mark for me. We are now getting close to the end. We're down to our last line of roles. Inside forward is going to be up next, and for me, oh, am I having it in GOAT or am I having it in great? I think I'm going to have to put it in GOAT. It's definitely under consideration. You will get so many great results out of an inside forward. Even a player that maybe doesn't have the highest finishing in the world, if they've got some pace, they will do a very good job. For me, I'm going to have inside forward up there. Let's move on to the next one, inverted wing back. Usable, nothing special. I think you can get some fun styles of play out of this, particularly with your Cancelo style wing backs that like to come into midfield and create chances from there, but I don't think it necessarily blows me away, so I'm very happy just having that in the usable section. Inverted winger is a great role. Not quite as good as inside forward in my opinion, but a very effective one that will get you some top results, particularly if you've got a wide player that tends to be more of a crosser than he would be a shooter. Set him as inverted winger. I really do love the roles where you have the wrong foot on the wrong wing, so if you're a left winger, I like them with a right foot to be able to come inside, and the same if you've got a right winger on their left foot. I tend to play quite attacking wing backs that like to push past their wide players, so it works really well if those wide players are then coming in and trying to create chances that way. And your inverted winger, you can get so many top results out of them, and a lot of players surprisingly will suit that role. Libero probably would have been down here in previous years, but this year is much better, much more effective, and very satisfying to watch in game. They definitely put a lot of work into that this year to make that role more true to life. Pressing forward, I'm going to have in the usable section. A few years ago, it definitely would have been up here, but I don't think it is as effective nowadays. But if you've got someone with high work rate, maybe in a front two, it can work better. I don't tend to like it as a solo forward option. I tend to like it more if they are playing in a striker pairing, maybe with an advanced forward or a complete forward. We've only got a few left to go. Segundo Volante, what a role. That's going right up there as the great. You know what, actually? I'm going to change something here. Segundo Volante is going to be in the GOAT section, and Shadow Striker is going to drop down a little bit. If you have a Segundo Volante on attack this year, sometimes even two of them, you will see some amazing results out of it, some great football to watch as well as they break the lines. And if you see many of the nap tactics that we've done on the channel this year that are very effective, quite aggressive tactics, the Segundo Volante can be a real benefit to any system that plays in that way. If you haven't tried one yet, that'll be my biggest takeaway from the video. Give them a go. Put it on the attack duty and watch the results come through. Wide midfielder, that's going straight in a void. I think it's up there with wide target man and wide playmaker, just as roles I don't tend to use, but also I don't think are particularly effective. Maybe if you're in, say, a 4-4-2, this could be something that's quite effective, but in most formations, I don't think a wide midfielder is what you're going to want. And then a winger, I'm going to have unusable. It's a role that you think might be a little bit better. If you have one that's really pacey, they can be effective, but it's just not a role that I think gets enough results compared to, say, the inverted winger or the inside forward. And here we go. This is the final setup of what we're left with. Not in any particular order within their categories, but I have now categorized them, and I think the only decision left to make now is what is the GOAT role. Is it inside forward? I don't think so. I think for me it'll be between advanced forward and Segundo Volante, but I really do think for 2 years in a row, advanced forward is just the role to go for. I almost hope they do lower the effectiveness of it in coming seasons of FM, or at least boost the other striker roles a little bit, because the advanced forward, like I say, if you've got a little bit of pace, a little bit of strength, have them as an advanced forward, they'll break the match engine even with 8 finishing and 10 composure. Just put them as an advanced forward, ask them to break the offside trap, and before you know it, you've got a 40 goal a season player. So for that reason, it has to be in the GOAT section. But of course, this is just my opinion as always, so let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.